Okay, today we're gonna do a mock interview.
Okay.
During this interview, we're gonna focus on instructional practices. That concludes classroom management and kind of just professional development and like what we've learned over education and kind of the philosophy of education as well. So if you could kind of just introduce yourself to me and like tell me about yourself, that would be awesome.
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Natalee Sorensen, and I graduated from UVU with a bachelor's in elementary education. And I'm super, super excited about it because I love getting to work with kids. I started off working with kids by doing therapy with kids who have autism. And I loved being able to see them grow. And I loved being able to see them become more independent and to be able to learn skills so they could do things by themselves without having to rely on other people. And I loved getting to see how those skills help them to reach their own goals and be able to do some awesome things for themselves.
Yeah, do you mind asking where did you work previously?
Previously,
You said you worked at what did you say you worked at?
I did behavioral therapy with a place called ABS Kids.
Okay, fine. I was
And
just wanting to
then,
write that down, so thank you for
yeah,
explaining a little
yeah,
more.
you're good.
Okay.
But then I've worked in several different elementary schools since then with different grades. So I've been able to get some different experience. And that's been my favorite part of teaching has been just getting to see those kids grow and develop their own skills and become their own independent people and be able to figure out um, being able to be successful on their own.
Totally. And how did you like UVU? Did you enjoy schooling through UVU?
I loved UVU. I felt like it gave me a lot of really practical experiences. I got to do a lot of field work as well as the classwork. So I got to apply what I was learning. So I felt like I got to solidify those skills, which has helped me to feel more confident as a teacher and to feel like I can come into the school year knowing what I want to do.
Awesome. Perfect. Okay, we're gonna kind of move into. I have a few questions for you. How do you incorporate learning theories into your teaching practices, and how can you kind of provide examples of like the specific theories that you learned in school? Um, yeah, how can you provide specific theories in your instruction as you
Yeah,
teach?
definitely. So I love using the learning theories in my teaching. I think that the learning theories help the kids to take responsibility for their own learning. And it puts an emphasis on helping the kids become passionate about their own learning. And so I love to use them as often as I possibly can to help encourage that mindset in my students. So, for example, I love to use the classical conditioning learning theory to be able to help my kids become passionate about the content themselves. So, for example, in my last class, I wanted the kids to become passionate about the reading and I wanted them to have fun with reading so they would do it on their own. So I found things that they already found fun. I made a little fort in the classroom. I found stuffed animals that I thought they would like. So I paired something that was already fun for them and I let them use those things during reading time. So they got to sit in the fort and read with the stuffed animals. And I was hoping that by pairing those fun things with reading, that reading would then become fun. And then reading on its own would be fun for the kids. And then they'd be motivated by themselves to learn. And I wouldn't have to nag them about reading. So that's one way that I used
Okay,
it.
I actually love that you're talking about like using things around your classroom. I think that's super important as a teacher because we have these classrooms and the fun ideas that we build around the classroom. I think it's really important that we utilize those. So that's really awesome.
I agree. And I also agree. I also think being able to pair positive consequences with good behavior is such a big part of that learning as well. And so I try to use that operant conditioning a lot in my teaching as well. And I try to show the kids, hey, if you learn this during our lesson, then you'll be able to do this. So, for example, I try to show them how learning to count money will, during our math lesson, will help them be able to count their money so they know if they have enough for the toy they want to buy. So I try to pair that positive behavior with a positive consequence to try to help them become excited about doing it on their own as well.
Yeah, I love that. That's Yeah, that's great. That kind of goes into my next question that I was kind of wanting to ask you. How do you kind of differentiate instruction to the meet of the different needs of your students? So if you have someone who's a diverse learner in your classroom and needs a little more help, how are you kind of differentiating the instruction just to meet their needs?
Yeah, absolutely. So um I really love using the different learning preferences in my styles of teaching. So I try to vary what learning preference is being targeted with each lesson that I do. So, for example, if I'm teaching, when I have been teaching adding in the past, to help the more hands-on learners and the people that think better by doing things, I tried to have counting blocks out. And so we've used the counting blocks to learn how to add together. And then to help the kids who are more analytical, I tried to the next day teach adding through written out equations.
Gotcha.
So I try to use different learning preferences. I also really like using grouping to be able to help the kids. So, for example, I like to group by ability for several of the subjects. For reading groups, I have grouped them based on their reading ability. So, I've grouped the high readers all together and the lower readers all together, and then I can assign separate books to each group. So, more challenging books to the higher readers and more simple books to the lower readers to just help the higher readers be challenged and not get bored, and the lower readers to build their skill set. And so I think those help meet the different needs while also still helping the kids each grow in their own way.
Totally. And I just have a quick question. Sorry, it's kind of on the side, but while the kids are in their grouping, like you're saying, you like to use grouping as a strategy. What are you doing as a teacher? Are you walking around, or how are you like making sure you're involved while the students are grouping?
Yeah, absolutely. So for each of the groups, I like to be able to do the reading with them. So I have us get together as a group and I like to read the book with them and then ask the kids questions about what they're reading, how they can connect it to their own lives and kind of gauge their comprehension that way.
Okay, gotcha. That is perfect. Okay, I kind of just have one more question for you. How do you kind of, I guess this kind of goes along with grouping as well, but how do you kind of encourage critical thinking and problem solving throughout your students? So when you're giving a group lesson or while you're working in small groups, how are you encouraging kids to think outside of the box and kind of like use their own minds as you're teaching?
Yeah, definitely. So, as far as the critical thinking goes, I like to have my students be able to think about the work that they are doing and be able to take time to analyze it. So, I will give an assignment to them. And then after they complete the assignment, I have them talk about it with the other kids at their table or with their partner to talk about how they completed the assignment, why they completed it that way, and things like that. So, for example, during our last math unit, we were talking about algebra and solving algebra problems. And so I handed out the worksheet and I had each of the kids fill out the worksheet. And then once they all had time to do that, I had them talk with their tables. And each person got to share how they solved the problem, why they solved it that way, why they thought that strategy was the easiest to use. And then I let those kids in the group ask different questions to each other, like, oh, I see that you drew this picture. Why did you draw it that way? Or to give compliments, oh, I really like how you lined up the numbers in that equation, things like that. And I really feel like being able to take a step back and analyze and explain their own work helps them think about why did I do this? How did I do it? And it helps cement those ideas while also developing their critical thinking. As far as problem solving goes, I love to use classroom meetings. So every day we have a meeting at the start of the day where the kids can talk about issues that they've had in the classroom, and the kids themselves can come up with solutions to the problems. And I, as a teacher, help as facilitator just to make sure that things go well. But I try to stay out of the way as much as possible. Just the other day, in fact, we had a student who during the classroom meeting said that they were upset because some of the other kids didn't let them play tag at recess. And so I had the kids talk about it and figure out how to solve that problem. And it turns out that the kids didn't know that this child wanted to play tag with them. And so they talked about how a solution to that problem could be meeting up at the start of recess and asking who wants to play. And so they were able to solve that problem on their own. And so I think that really helps build their problem solving skills as well.
Yeah, I totally love that. That kind of goes into something I've been thinking about. How do you feel like your classroom management skills are? Do you feel like you are overall like do you feel like you're able to deal with the kids in your classroom when there are behaviors that are not appropriate? And how do you deal with things like that?
Yeah, so I like to start with the very beginning of the year, setting very clear rules and very clear expectations with the students so that there aren't any surprises. And I know that in this stage of life, kids really want to be able to help build that. They want to follow the rules of a community setting. So I really try to establish those rules well, and I try to explain how those rules help our classroom run smoothly and help it avoid chaos. And I think that that plays well with just where they are developmentally. Developmentally, they want to be following the rules so that they don't disrupt how things are going in society. And then when I follow through on those rules, I pull the kids aside that maybe are struggling with the classroom rules and I talk about, hey, why did you engage in this behavior? Can you see how that was disruptive to the rest of the class? And I give them a chance to use their problem solving skills to decide how can you solve this problem and how can we avoid it in the future. And yeah.
No, totally. I actually love that. I think one thing is also super important that I have found in my teaching career that using positive reinforcement throughout your day and every single day, and just your tone of voice is super important as a teacher. I think I mean, there's things that happen all day while you're teaching at recess, things like that. And I think positive reinforcement, just like, hey, Billy, you're doing great, or hey, Billy, thank you for sitting like that. I think that's super important for the rest of the classroom to see that, oh, the teacher's pointing out the good, and that encourages students to also kind of want the good, you know? Uh, but thank you for your time and your responses. I think that everything you went through is super awesome. I think one of my favorite things that stood out to me, like I said earlier, was kind of utilizing your classroom. I think that's really important as a teacher and as students. I think it's important to have an engaging classroom and a classroom where students feel safe. And it sounds like as a teacher that that's what you're giving your students. Um, let me think if I have anything else to go over with you. Um, I love that you were able to kind of self-reflect and to know that things are happening at recess. And as a teacher, you may not know what's happening at recess, but kind of giving the student time to problem solve and talk it out with you probably really helps as students. Let me think if there's anything else. Um, okay. I think that was probably it. Well, I think you did really good. I think that overall your teaching strategies and your teaching skills sound amazing, and sounds like you're the teacher that everybody would like to be. So, thank you for taking the time to come and interview with me today.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm excited to be here.